Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are tackling a really fascinating medical mystery. It's a tale of two pains. They both start with that nagging ache in your arm or leg, but as you'll see, they lead to two wildly different places.
Okay, so let's set the scene. You've got this pain, right? Or maybe it's a weird weakness or even numbness in your arm or leg, and it just won't quit. It's incredibly frustrating, and honestly, it can really mess with your life. And what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably a pinched nerve, right? It's the go-to diagnosis. We immediately think, oh, it's got to be my neck, or it's definitely something on my lower back. But here's the twist. What if everyone's looking in the wrong place? Sure, the problem could be in the spine, right, where the nerve starts its journey. But what if the real culprit is hiding somewhere else entirely, deep within a complex web of nerves way downstream?
All right, let's break this down. To really get what's going on, we need to look at a map of the crime scene, so to speak. We're talking about two very different locations. And I love this analogy. Think of it as the central train station versus a massive, complicated switching yard just outside of town.
So when the problem is right there at the spine, doctors have a name for it: radiculopathy. That's your classic pinched nerve. The trouble is at the nerve root. You know, the central station where the signal is supposed to leave on time. But what happens if the signal leaves the station perfectly fine and then gets all messed up later? If the problem is in that big, tangled network where all the nerve tracks are sorted and rerouted, that's called a plexopathy. The issue isn't at the station, it's out in the switching yard.
And this image, wow, this shows you exactly what we're talking about. This is the lumbosacral plexus, the one that handles your legs. See how it's not the spine? It's this incredible hub where all these different nerve roots come in, get sorted, bundled up, and then sent out on new tracks to the rest of the leg. A problem here is a totally different ballgame than a problem back at the spine.
So we've got two different locations. That begs the question, are the culprits the same? What's causing all this trouble in the spine versus in the plexus? And this right here is where things get really interesting, because the causes are, well, worlds apart. For the spine, that's radiculopathy. You're usually looking at mechanical issues, things like a herniated disc, arthritis, stuff like that. But for the plexus, the causes are often way more serious. We're talking tumors, damage from radiation, major inflammation, or even infections.
Let's look at the spine first. Here, the problem is often very physical, very direct. You're looking at a classic herniated disc. That soft, jelly-like center has bulged out, and it is literally, physically squishing that nerve root. It's a pretty clear-cut case of mechanical pressure.
But when we turn to the plexus, the picture can change dramatically. Take a look at this. A 2011 study looked at the brachial plexus, that's the one for the arm, and what they found is pretty sobering. In cases that weren't caused by an accident or injury, tumors were the #1 cause, over a third of all cases.
And if that statistic doesn't hit home, this image will. This scan makes it all terrifyingly real. See that bright yellow and orange mass? That's a cancerous tumor. And look where it is. It's not in the spine. It has invaded and is now crushing the brachial plexus in this person's shoulder. That's where the pain is coming from.
Okay, so this is the central challenge, right? The symptoms can look almost identical, but the causes can be life and death different. So, how do doctors crack this case? How do they find the real source of the pain? Well, they've got a whole detective's toolkit. It always starts with listening to the patient's story and a really thorough physical exam. But the real smoking guns, the things that crack the case wide open, are these amazing electrical tests that let them trace the nerve signals, kind of like an electrician hunting for a short in the wiring. Let's look at how they compare the clues for just two types of plexus problems. Check this out. If a tumor is the cause, the first thing the patient usually feels is pain. We're talking over 80% of the time, and it's almost always just on one side of the body. But if the damage is from radiation, the first symptom is often weakness, not pain, and it can eventually spread to both sides. And then you have this very specific electrical fingerprint.
Yeah, one of these electrical clues is a dead giveaway for radiation damage.
They're called myokymia discharges. Basically, they're these little involuntary muscle twitches that the electrical test can pick up. And get this, more than 40% of patients with radiation damage have them, but you almost never see them in patients with tumors. That's not just a clue. That's a massive piece of evidence. And here's another brilliant test that helps them pinpoint the location: spine versus plexus. They check the strength of the sensory nerve signal. Think about it. If the problem is in the spine, the signal traveling past that point is still strong. But if the problem is in the plexus, the signal gets weaker after it passes through. It's an ingenious way to figure out if the break in the circuit is before or after that main switching yard.
So, okay, we've seen how the detectives solve the mystery. But what's the big deal? Why is getting this diagnosis absolutely 100% right so critical? Because the treatment for a spine problem and a plexus problem, well, they're not even in the same universe. Getting this right changes everything for the patient. It sets them on a completely different path, and frankly, it can be the difference between life and death. And you can see why just by looking at the treatments. On the left, for a spine problem, a surgeon might do a discectomy. Basically, they go in and snip out the bit of disc that's causing the pressure. It's a very targeted repair. But on the right, look at that. For a plexus problem, a surgeon might have to perform an incredibly intricate reconstruction using tiny nerve grafts to rebuild that whole complex network. It's like the difference between changing a light bulb and rewiring your entire house. One is a focused, specific repair. The other is a massive, complex reconstruction. And you absolutely cannot fix one with the tools meant for the other. It just doesn't work. So it really makes you think, doesn't it? The next time you hear someone say pinched nerve, you might pause and wonder, where's the real mystery? It's a powerful reminder that the most obvious answer isn't always the right one, and digging deeper can be the only way to find the real path to getting better.